Hello, welcome to Humble Running. I have got a big shoe review comparison lined up for today. One I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I've got the Sportiva Prodigio Pro up against the Hoka Tecton X3. Looking at these shoes right off the bat, two of the top ankle collar / gaiters in the game. I think every trail shoe should have something along these lines. I know some people are not high on this high of an ankle collar. I think this setup for the Sportiva Pro is an excellent kind of middle ground between a regular shoe and having something to seal debris out. I do love the Hoka though. So for me, as far as testing these shoes, I have not raced in either of these shoes. I've got the Tecton X3 at the end of last year, I think a week after I completed a 100-miler. If I had gotten this shoe like a week earlier, I definitely would have done that 100-miler in this shoe. The schedule just didn't line up for me to do another long ultra distance race in this shoe. Same thing with the Prodigio Pro. I got these at TRE in November, light racing season. I did the 20-miler. I wanted to test out the Norda 005 in that particular race, so I just haven't gotten into the season yet. Haven't had a good race that feels like a good fit for this type of shoe, but I have a race or two in mind for this shoe later in the year. Definitely want to see maybe which one of these shoes I would pick first for one of those longer distance ultras. So I am gonna go AB straight out of the box here. I did get a question a while ago about using a reference shoe in my AB testing, and I didn't think it was a great idea as far as running in a reference shoe or I think it was a control shoe was the question there. But in terms of sizing, if I had to pick a control shoe, it would definitely be this Topo Pursuit 2 here. This is a US 9.5, and I think the fit is really good. It has the toe box space that I want, and in terms of length, it's not overly long. I don't have a full thumbs width, but kind of like definitely 3/4 toes width, and with a secure fit and no foot movement in this shoe, I think this is pretty much at US 9.5. This is my kind of control sizing. So 9.5 is perfect for me in this shoe. That being said, a recommendation that I typically give for the Prodigio Pro, one full size up. This is a US 10.5 here. I've heard from one or two people in comments and messages that, you know, they tried to go a half size up and they were squeezed on width, which was surprising. I guess if you have a wider foot, you could potentially be squeezed if, you know, this kind of narrower section is maybe perhaps a little further back in a, you know, too small of a size. Again, I don't have a full thumbs width here. I've got just short of a full thumbs width, but again, with this secure fit of this shoe that I really like, it's not an issue. You know, I would have to see, I haven't run this shoe over a super long ultra like 100K or 100 mile. I would hope that with foot swelling, it wouldn't become an issue, being that the fit is so secure. And with the Hoka here, Tecton X3, I am a half size up for my ultra sizing. So I am at a 10 in this shoe right here. I do have this shoe also in a 9.5 at my true to size, but I find that I usually don't go true to size in Hoka for any shoe, typically a half size up in Hoka. So this is a 10 here, US 10.5 here, and I think I have a little bit, this is a little bit more rounded in the front in this US 10. Again, I have this exact same shoe in a 9.5, and I find that it's just a little less volume around this area than I would like, especially for longer distances. So I would definitely go a half size up in this. Even though there's quite a bit of volume, you know, that space around the front of the toes, I think you want that. I don't think the foothold is as good in this shoe as this one. We'll talk about that on the run. With maybe your foot perhaps shifting a little bit forward, you want to make sure you have some space around this area. Less of a concern here, I think, because the fit and security foothold is, I think, better. X3 on my right foot, Prodigio Pro on my left foot. First 2-minute impression here. The stack heights are a little bit different. The Prodigio I've got at 34.28, and the Tecton here at 40-35. So that's a significant difference in stack height, but I'll say on the run, first 2 minutes, of course, it doesn't feel too apparent to me. The thing that strikes me right away is the width of the ground platform between the two. The Hoka's wider. I'll check my measurements here in a sec, but they're both similar at the forefoot. I think the Hoka may be a touch wider at the forefoot, but the Hoka maintains width on the ground noticeably through the midfoot and also a bit under the rear, under the heel. And I do feel that, especially on this descent. I'm not trying to be on the heel too much, I'm trying to land on the middle of my foot, and I feel the width under my right foot. Definitely feels wider on the ground. I wouldn't say it's necessarily too much of a difference in stability. It just feels like, yeah, I have a more square landing platform with the X3. That may kind of lead to a more nimble feel with the Prodigio Pro. I'll see. Got a bit of varied terrain here. Big rocks along this edge here on the way in. And then I have some options to go kind of up and down, across some creeks. Definitely gonna do a wet test, so stay tuned for that. I know there are questions about the X3 perhaps running hot, maybe perhaps holding water due to that big knit collar. It's not something I've fully tested. Definitely haven't weighed out the shoes. Something I'll check here at the end of this run. So coming back to the ground platform, one thing I do want to kind of feel out on this run is if the Prodigio Pro does feel perhaps more agile, you know, for a kind of mountain mid to high stack shoe, that is. Not agile like a low to the ground speedster. Not gonna be like that, but you know, for a mid stack shoe, I imagine it's gonna be pretty agile. There's other factors, of course, besides just the ground platform. I recently was running in the Hoka X, and that's just, I checked the measurements. That platform's even wider than this one, so very cruisery shoe. That's a way heavier shoe, of course, so no comparison between these two. I mean, you know, comparison within a model lineup against the X3 here, but I would say not in terms of really racing, more like a companion training shoe to the X3. But yeah, the Hokas typically tend to maintain that wide platform. You think about the Speed Goat, Mafate Speed, they're all like wider under the midfoot. And I think people do appreciate that, especially longer ultras. You know, you just like to feel solid when you're landing. That seems to work for a lot of people. Prodigio Pro here, I love the feel of the shoe. And there, for my running style, being on the midfoot, a lot of times more on the forefoot, especially when I'm running faster, I like it. I like the feel of it because the forefoot width on the ground does match the Hoka. So I like that wide forefoot landing pad. But I still also like kind of a narrower under the midfoot. Not super narrow, but kind of mid-range. It definitely feels different than this Hoka. Definitely feels like perhaps get a little bit more flex, a little bit more twist under the midfoot. And that just leads to better ground feel and naturally better agility, you know, off-camber terrain, rocky technical stuff. I think it will feel better, more secure in the La Sportiva. The weight between these two shoes, very similar. I've got 9.6 ounces on the Prodigio Pro and 9.7 on the Tecton X3. Again, that's in different sizing. Those are for my 10.5 in the La Sportiva and 10 in the Hoka. So that's a good kind of comparative gauge. Can't always go by spec weights because you're not necessarily sure if that's the sizing that you're gonna run in. If there's differences in sizing, you know, that's gonna throw off your weights, you know, in comparison, especially across brands. I think paying attention to kind of the weights that I report, you know, for equivalent sizing is probably a better way to go. Especially, they kind of tend to, you know, undercount. I've never seen them report a higher weight on the company's website. So you may wonder, okay, the Hoka's 40-35, La Sportiva 34-28, but the Hoka's a little bit, just a tiny bit heavier. What gives? I think it comes down to the upper. The Hoka has this matrix upper. Also, the PBA foam of the Hoka is going to be lighter, so you have a bigger volume of foam, but the Nitro TPU with Nitro EVA carrier of the La Sportiva probably going to be slightly heavier, so they may balance out right there. Again, the matrix upper, even just having them on my feet, it feels a little more minimal. You know, I don't think the security and lockdown is as good as a Prodigio Pro, but yeah, it's that matrix, so it's like a single layer. It's kind of some underlays for a little bit of structure on the inside, but even on foot, I notice the Prodigio Pro, the upper seems a little more substantial. It looks like got a little bit more material around my foot. Again, you've got that inner knit booty, then you have that outer mesh TPU that's kind of like an open weave. Hoka's kind of got like one layer. If you're thinking like, okay, maybe due to the difference in midsole out, Hoka feels like it has a lighter upper, but then you've also got that higher ankle gaiter collar thing. So even though the upper's a little bit lighter, you know, you got a little bit of extra there around the ankle, so that may balance them out. Outsoles between the two shoes, I would say performance is similar. Vibram Mega Grip in the Hoka, you got Friction 2.0 white in the Prodigio Pro. That's their stickier compound. I think it's a little softer than their red compound, so a little less durability, but you know, stickier, better traction for kind of mountain and wet terrain. And I'm gonna get some creeks up here, so we will see. But in terms of weight, about the same amount of rubber coverage, I would say. Both have 4mm lugs. There's kind of an exposed cutout where you can see through to the midsole in the Hoka. La Sportiva has an outsole cutout. They have a speed film in there. Not sure if that's what that is that you can see through to, but the foam is not exposed under the middle of the shoe as it is with the Tecton. Gonna save the wet test for later. I don't want to have the shoes being soaked and feeling heavier than they typically would while I'm still going through the A/B testing here. Another thing about the ride that is apparent to me as let's see, about 40 minutes into this run, the rocker is definitely different between these two shoes. More of an apparent rocker with the La Sportiva. Feel like it starts around the ball of the foot, kind of rolls up through the base of the toes. So I feel that rocker more in my left shoe, the Prodigio Pro. Tecton has Hoka's Meta rocker. I always find that starts more in the middle of the shoe, kind of, it feels to me like behind the ball of the foot. Feels like a less apparent rocker, but probably more efficient for longer distances, because you know, you can land more centered around the midfoot, you know, and count on that rocker to start a little earlier, and you have the two parallel plates in there, kind of give you a little oomph there to get you through your foot strike. Prodigio Pro, you don't want to be landing way too far back, or at least it seems to want you really kind of like on the ball of your foot. It's definitely adaptable for midfoot, heel striking, forefoot striking, everything. You're not gonna have a problem with this shoe no matter how you land. But it seems like just in terms of the rocker, you wanna be up on that forefoot, gives you a good amount of ground feel especially, and then leading into that kind of quick roll into the toes. I like it a lot. Feels quicker, for sure. So that was my infamous Zagama 2 wet rock leap of faith there. I doubled back, tried a couple times with both shoes, did not slip at all. I didn't fully plow through the water there, but I made sure that the rock was nice and slick. No problems. La Sportiva, Friction White, Vibram Mega Grip. You know, between these two shoes, traction, wet grip, very good. All right, so this is a nice little studio here for a close-up on the uppers. I feel like, you know, if you kind of take a look at these, I've got these X3s kind of cinched up a little bit tighter. There's a little more volume in the upper. This is stretchy, but you can see a little kind of puckering for my foot. Again, I feel like this 10 has more volume in the toe box and more space than this 10.5, but I think sizing is about equal between the two. Even though I have them cinched tighter, they feel more roomy and more comfortable. You can see my foot kind of moving around like that. In this one, there's less of that side-to-side motion. I'm really kind of more strapped down, especially around this area of the midfoot, right around here. Again, something I talked about in my last Q&A is that you could probably play around with these laces. If this feels too tight for you, there's, you know, 4 eyelets pretty close together here, and you probably don't need all of them. So if you're squeezed maybe up front, maybe you want to play around with these two. If this feels a little too tight, you may want to bypass or just play around with this area right here to get the right foot. Again, this volume is perfect for me. I would love to feel as strapped down as I do in this shoe in the X3, but perhaps having a little, this X3's extra space in front of the toes. Here, it's wide enough. It tapers just a little bit more. Again, I don't know, some people may have, I really think this is not a tapered toe box. This is a very comfortable toe box, as long as you have the right size. You know, again, I say a full size up in these. If you're going true to size, no way you're gonna be squeezed. Even a half size, you may be squeezed here. So if you do go a full size, you'll be better off in these. Pop them off real quick. You know, they have booty setups, both of them, and I think they're 2 of the best. You know, I would say I have no issues with Hoka's being higher. I don't feel hot in this shoe at all. I'll run through all those streams, and maybe at the very end, I'll, you know, really soak them good before I get back to the truck. But I have no problems with this. You know, I did race this shoe for a chunk of miles in a backyard ultra this summer. Extremely dry, sandy in September. All the other shoes I had previously worn, I was getting irritation in my toes because sand was getting into the shoe. But once I switched to these for the last, I don't know, third of the race, nothing got into my shoe. So, you know, if you have stuff getting into your shoe and you don't want it, that's when you want a gaiter. Like, I don't understand people that don't appreciate the gaiter. You must be in different kind of terrain where, or I don't know, maybe you have feet that can withstand that kind of grit. Anyway, you know, this booty on the Prodigio Pro goes all along the interior. It's more of this fabric kind of material. Again, something in my full review, these bolsters, love them here for lace bite. Interestingly, the X3 does not have these kind of bolsters here, but for whatever reason, maybe it's the location of these upper eyelets, I don't get any lace bite, even though there's like no cushioning here. I find that almost baffling, but it does seem to work for me, so I'm not gonna complain. Here, you've got these, it's kind of like a clamshell kind of a thing, and you could really strap down, like if you want to be in mountain terrain and be hopping around and be really secure, you could lace them up pretty tight, you know, and not have to worry about lace bite. This is a great element of this shoe. Yeah, the knit upper, it's more substantial in this. In my wet test against the 005, it did seem to relatively hold more water than the 005, and that's due to this more substantial inner booty. With the X3, again, it's a booty, but you know, it's really only the gaiter part and this, you know, this part that's, you know, what would be normally a tongue. That's kind of the knit element, but the rest of the shoe here, this is like a neoprene, and this is all matrix, whereas inside, underneath this power wire here, you know, you still have the booty going all the way down here. It probably helps to get better lockdown, but I think it will hold more water than this shoe, even though people say this shoe, you know, feels heavy. As I'm looking through here, I could see through here. You know, I'm seeing the shadow from the sun on the footbed here. So I imagine water's gonna go out. The heel area in this shoe, you can see the outline of it in this. You've got these bolsters, and they're along the inside, kind of thick, and that's what's there to hold. The heel cup is not very substantial at all. You just really have those kind of two U-shaped bolsters coming, you know, below your ankle bone and kind of holding it down. I think it's great. It doesn't feel as super grabby as some heel cups, but again, I think of this more as a very long distance shoe, like at least 50 mile plus, you know, more like 100K, 100 mile shoe. So I don't mind this not being as really dialed. I think they went a good route here, making it less rigid, so at least it's comfortable. Decent amount of flex for having carbon plates, but again, that Meta rocker I was talking about earlier, it seems like you want to land here. It's very efficient for kind of longer distances. If I take a look at this shoe here, definitely more flex. You know, this is narrower for sure, so you get more flex, more feel, and I feel like the rocker point is more further here. Get more feel in this area of the shoe than I do with the Hoka. The Hoka, I feel like I'm just kind of more solid landing, and then the whole shoe is kind of going, which I think makes sense because it's kind of like a 100-mile shoe, you know? You're kind of like, you don't want to have as much pressure on the front of the foot over such a longer distance. I mean, I think you'll be okay in this shoe, but you'll definitely feel more under here. And I think that's probably why, you know, this outsole, they made a point of wrapping it up and around the metatarsal area here for protection, you know, because that's kind of the area where you're landing and where you're feeling the ground. So I really like both of these shoes. This shoe feels quicker, you know, as I'm cutting in and around through that kind of windy, by the creek, you know, kind of sideways section at times. This shoe definitely feels more strapped to my foot. Definitely feel more agile. This shoe fit is good, but it just feels more comfortable, more comfort oriented. I feel like probably for a 100-miler, I would definitely favor this shoe. You know, especially, it's not like we're comparing, well, like a lighter weight shoe here, you know, and you're saying, well, I want more protection, but I'm gonna sacrifice weight. The weights are essentially within 0.1 of an ounce. So you're not giving up weight with the X3. Probably gonna be terrain and course specific. Yeah, again, as I'm dialing this in, more space in the toe box, and that's fine with me. I like that. If I'm going 100K, 100 mile, I want that space. So yeah, let's maybe I'll go, I think I'll probably oh, let's see here. Ooh, there we go. I think I'll probably go a little further up here on this trail. I don't think I'll do too much of an A-B where I switch shoes this time, because this is getting kind of long. Let's see. Well, so much for not getting the feet wet till the end. So I think I am gonna turn around here. Bunch of trees down. It's getting a bunch of snow. I think it don't make sense to be trudging around too much in snow. Maybe I'll go a little further up there, see how that is. Actually, not too bad. I'll go a little higher up so I can get some quick downhill testing in here. Yeah, kind of like I thought, further up here. This is a good downhill shoot here to run quick and speed down, but this much snow. Both shoes were pretty good there going down that descent. It wasn't crazy technical, but you know, there's some rocks around and a couple steeple parts that kind of throw you a little bit quicker. Okay in both shoes. Definitely Prodigio Pro. Feels like I have more agility, more confidence, more assuredness that the shoe is really strapped to my foot. Tecton, likely want to be a little more careful kind of with your foot placements. Make sure you're flat, nice and solid. But if you could do that, it's not an issue. So I am about 6 miles out here. Went a bit further than I intended. I thought I was gonna do a, short round. Gotta head on back to the truck, do a quick shoe change, see if anything jumps out at me. Probably do a minor jaunt with both shoes. I'll definitely get them soaked pretty good on that second round, and then we'll have some final thoughts. Ouch. I just ran through, I don't know how many, 5, 6, 7, 8 streams, and I feel like the Tecton seems to hold water more initially. Like you could feel it kind of fill up in the bottom of the shoe. It has those big sidewalls. I think their sidewalls are more prominent than the Prodigio. So I noticed that more right away, but I think the La Sportiva seems to hold on to the water more. Like that booty is more substantial, and there's just more booty material, more knit material all around the foot, whereas the Hoka, a lot of it is matrix. Okay, definite ankle deep there, above the gaiters, both of the shoes. Didn't get too much sand in there. This one wasn't as sandy as my last wet test video, so it should just be straight water absorption that we're weighing out. We'll see. Yeah. Can't tell right now. Just cold. My feet are cold. Howdy. About 15 minutes since these shoes were in the creek there. Weigh them out, see what we get. Okay, let's check. Pretty solid here. They're both similar in weight. Let's check them wet now. We've got 324 on the La Sportiva. And we have 328 on the Hoka. All right, so that's a wrap for this A/B test. I'm not gonna go back and change shoes and run a different section. That actually ended up being a bit long. It was 1 hour 50. Close to about 13 miles. So I intended to go a little shorter and then switch shoes, but I haven't actually run on this trail since before the winter, first time this season. So I always kind of like lose track of how far away those streams are. And I wanted to kind of run through. It's fun running through there aside from the testing aspect. So I ended up going a little further than I intended. So I don't think I particularly need to take another round here. As far as the wet testing, the Hoka ended up being a bit heavier relatively compared to the La Sportiva there. I did mention just before I weighed them that I felt like the Hoka didn't absorb as much water. We're only talking about a few grams there. I think it's like a 1 or 2% difference. I'll put my spreadsheet up on the screen there. So the Hoka did not soak up water like a sponge. It didn't feel crazy to me. I know some people have brought that up, but I just don't feel that's the case, actually. Maybe the reason my perception was off is because, this Hoka, this is all matrix material right here. There's nothing really to absorb in there. Those inner bolsters are a little kind of cushy. Those have some water. But it's really going to be this knit section here. That's kind of like the tongue area and the gaiter. Whereas this La Sportiva here, the booty is all around. and I could even feel the moisture in this booty. So I think the perception is that you know, booty being around my foot just feels more wet all around the top of my foot, whereas this one, I don't really feel it on my foot. This is neoprene, you know, that's not going to be too wet, but these sides here, I don't feel the water, but I think it's probably this knit collar that kind of holds on to a bit of moisture, and I don't have the perception of that feeling heavy because it's not on my foot, it's higher up on my ankle. I don't know if that makes a difference kind of performance-wise, you know, where you have the weight situated. If you have more weight kind of on your foot, does that affect you more or feel heavier than having it perhaps maybe a little bit, we're talking a few grams here, higher up around your ankle? I do think in like exposed, it's kind of overcast today and it's kind of in the 60s, I think. But in hotter weather, I think this would dry out more quickly than it is today. You know, the relative difference was not that much, so I wouldn't call this a water soaking sponge or anything like that by any means. On the run, we'll say, again, the platform is the big difference here. This one just feels more stable. It's wider here. I think this is going to be more versatile for kind of a wider range of runners, from beginners, mid-packers, advanced runners. Advanced runners are going to be able to handle a higher, wider platform in technical terrain. They'll be able to manage that easier. Also at slower paces, you know, it's going to feel more comfortable, more stable landing. And again, this is not a heavy shoe. It's not like it's a high stack, heavyweight shoe. It's a high stack, pretty lightweight shoe. I think I had 9.6 or 7, and I think I did weigh 9.5 out of the box fresh with this shoe. This is around the same weight too, but not as much stack. You do get more ground feel with this shoe. I think, you know, with, like I talked about, that rocker kind of starting earlier, feels more stable, more of a kind of consistent roll with this shoe. This one, you know, the rocker is more apparent. Like I felt like I was more on this part of my foot through more of the stride, and just more ground feel under the ball of the foot, felt more agile. The upper fit is more secure in this. When I did my close-up, a little bit more wiggle room in the toe box of this, a little bit more kind of side to side in the foothold here, but it is more comfortable. So I do think this slots in more in the 100K to 100-mile distance range for most runners. This one I would slot in a little lower. I would say anywhere from 50K to 50 mile up to 100K, 100 mile for more advanced runners. If you're more advanced, you don't need probably as much cushion. Also, if you're perhaps a lighter weight runner, this will do just fine. You know, pro runners, advanced runners can take this shoe very far. In terms of protection, you've got 35 at the forefoot versus 28 here. So this does feel more protective under the forefoot. If you're someone that the balls of your feet get worn out, you feel pressure, impact pressure, especially in the second half of longer races, that tends to get me sometimes. This is a very good option. 35 mil is a lot to be under the forefoot, plus you have 2 carbon fiber plates here. So aside from efficiency, that's going to add protection, those plates. This one's got that speed film, I think it's called. So it is protective enough, but you know, I don't feel pressure under my forefoot. It's great in this shoe. It's just, you know, a little bit touch more in this one for sure. So that's why I would kind of slot this as a probably more capable distance shoe, more versatile distance shoe. Again, you can race this shorter distances. It's not a heavy shoe. It's a lightweight shoe. It's just about, you might not feel as agile in a shorter distance depending on how fast you're running. It's a wide platform, you're higher up, and again, the foothold is a little more, you get a little more comfort versus kind of lockdown with this one. I think if you're running shorter and perhaps likely faster, I would imagine, this really holds the foot, really wraps the foot, really feels agile. You can get around in this shoe quicker. The flexibility is better in this shoe. That leads to better agility, feeling a bit quicker on the run. This one you kind of have to maybe massage through technical areas, stiffer, you know, which is fine. You know, you're trading off that flexibility for kind of efficiency and protection. So we'll see where I end up racing these shoes. I have the Heaven's Gate race coming up in 8 days from now. I have the Vective Sky 2 lined up for that race. I know some of you may ask, why don't I run this shoe? That's a very good question. I just had the Sky 2 in mind because it has those 5mm lugs, very steep climbs in that, and very steep descent. So after running this test run here, this kind of cushion here, nitrogen, TPU core, EVA carrier, very energetic, very dynamic. Also, you know, you have good crash area in the heel, more so than the Sky 2, that's for sure. So, you know, it is kind of making me think if I do want to run this shoe, because it is flexible. One of the reasons I want to run the Sky 2, or I had in mind to run the Sky 2, is the flexibility for climbing. Also the security of that. It's really strapped down, that shoe. This shoe was probably strapped down just as much. I think the forefoot space in the Sky 2 is even wider, so I kind of, you know, like that. Steep uphills, climbing, I feel like the wide kind of spread out forefoot with the good midfoot hold is really good. This is similar, so I don't know. That's not, you know, it's not like that's a sprint race. It's 19 miles, 7,600 feet of gain. It's a lot. Do have to come back down from all that gain. So the cushion of this shoe is very appealing in that regard. I don't know. I may take this shoe out versus the Sky 2 this coming week. And if the Sky 2 feels too firm, maybe too little, I mean, the race is still going to be over 4 hours. So it's not like I'm talking about running a trail 10K or something where, you know, I could deal with getting my feet banged. You know, it's going to be rough on the feet, you know, in that shoe for sure. But I think, I don't know, my idea was that, you know, I could stand it, you know, for, I guess, 4 hours. And I think the outsole, the flexibility, the carbon plate, I think it would be just great for that race. But now it's got me thinking if this one could be good too. This would be easier on the feet for sure. I have to think closely about the course, but if, you know, this would feel more unstable, being that it's a bit higher stack, it feels like it's off the ground a little bit more than the Sky 2, even though the specs may indicate otherwise. It just has that kind of feel. Anyway, I'm gonna think about that. Maybe I'll do another A/B test midweek before the race. I only have 8 days, so we'll see what I have time to do. Also, I'm gonna work on my recap from the half marathon. So I'm doing interesting, you know, fast, you know, with elevation gain half marathon. Now I'm going up in the mountains for another race in 2 weeks. So very busy trying to squeeze stuff in between races, and then we'll see what comes up after that. That's a wrap for these two. If you'd like to see other ABs, of course, I'm still uncertain where I will race these shoes. We'll just see how. I think I have VJ Ultra 3 coming. It may be at my house right now when I get back. We'll see. So if you would like to see comparisons against these two shoes, let me know for sure. Like and subscribe, questions, commentary, everything down below as usual. Have a good day out on the trails. My initial thoughts and my kind of ongoing thoughts about this Hoka midsole was that the P-butt was like just very soft, very bouncy, and it is, you know, it's a lot. 40 under the heel, 35 under the forefoot. It's not as, say, solid as, you know, your typical EVA foams, but it has that kind of bounce. It has that energy. But when I got this shoe, I guess this was last summer, towards the end of the summer, I think it was more of a unique feel, that bounciness. So I was like, wow, compared to other shoes, this is just, you know, you got to be careful with this shoe. It's so bouncy, it's so high. Since then, you know, shoes like the La Sportiva have come out, also the Norda 005, and that with the TPEE is just super bouncy. So I think it's not as much as an anomaly, the softness of this Pima midsole, now that you have some of these other bouncy and responsive super foams in the mix on the market. I think I was struck on this run that it wasn't that far off. Like, it wasn't as drastic as I remember it being last summer, especially having them both on foot. They felt very similar. The main differences are differences that I pointed out right away. It just feels, this is why